The book of Job, verse 28 and 29. Uh, verse 28. I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent. Verse 29. Since I am already found guilty, why should I struggle in vain? Okay, so I'm hoping this works fine or sounds good. Okay, so the background footage is from MTG Arena. I think I was either playing some Commander Brawl, or what do you call it? Like, either Brawl or what do you call it? Like the standard 60 card Brawl or the 1v1 Commander for some of this arena footage. I think either earlier today or a couple days ago. Okay. So, I guess for today's video, okay, so I'll start this off with one little small thing for like a minute, and then I'll get to it. So I kind of just decided for the channel, I'm kind of mulling over, probably even for the past like 3 months, but I've just decided that I was just gonna end the walkthroughs on the channel. Like I'm like the normal, more traditional, like no commentary, just like the full walkthroughs of channels for like video games and stuff like that. I just decided to shut that down and stop it. And I think I'm going forward. I'm gonna focus more on commentary or stuff like this, right? Now I still like going through some of the walkthroughs, like playing playing arena, right? And like that kind of stuff, like kind of more like the one shots. And I also still want to go through certain games and talk about stuff. But the more traditional walkthroughs and stuff, I shut them all down. We're gonna focus going forward in holiness, if it's been God's will, and stuff like commentary. So like reviews, my thoughts on stuff, maybe some guides or stuff like that, or just all that kind of stuff. So, in holiness, if it's within God's will, that's just what's gonna happen. So, okay, so for today's video, I want to talk about the Witcher TV show from Netflix. Okay, so I know I probably made like a couple of videos about it within the past like year or two, but so I went through. I was looking for something to watch, and I ended up going back to watching some Netflix again. And I guess I just got so bored of all the stuff on like YouTube and stuff. All the nonsense they have. So I was looking for some new stuff. I found I'll probably make a video on the other one too. One of them I found was a series called The Last Airbender, or what's called Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action remake. Or not a remake, the live action version of it. And I also found The Witcher. So I watched both of those. So I'll probably make another video about that one. That'll be a different video, right? So for this one's for the TV show for The Witcher. It's only going to be seasons 1 through 3. I have not watched Blood Origins, to be honest. Supposedly it's terrible. So I mean, it's like I honestly don't know if I'm going to watch it or not, but this will just be seasons 1 through 3. Okay, so I wrote a little bit some notes down here. I want to put a little bit of some like a Christian perspective on it, and also just try to be like in a sense, just try to be like a little bit neutral about it too. Okay. Oh yeah, I also made a video I think a couple months ago about why I think people should consider giving this show another chance. Now I know the show has a lot of people are just very angry on the internet, and to be honest, that's just true in general. And also, yeah, a lot of people just don't like anything, to be honest. So it's really hard to. The critics are just very mad all the time about everything. So, I mean that is a thing. But I decided to give it another chance. I kind of went with a more like just kind of like a more clarity in my mind. I kind of just went like with an attitude of rolling with it. So. Oh yeah, I'll give some of my thoughts here. So overall, I want to say that I actually did like the show quite a bit, actually. Yeah, I mean, I feel like overall, I would probably give it somewhere between either like a mixed, kind of like a morally gray mixed review, or a mixed disposition or recommendation, to also I enjoyed it. I feel like a combination of both. Okay, so okay. Yeah, I'll kind of explain some of that, why that is. But so I wrote here. So some of my notes I wrote. I guess a little bit from the Christian perspective, but I guess also just. I mean, some of it's. I'll try to focus a little bit on the Christian point of view at one point throughout it, but also just kind of like a more normal, neutral review. So I wrote a positive, and I wrote like a neutral, and then like a negative disposition. So here, I'll start with the. I'll start with the positive, sure, why not? I don't know. So I guess what I thought was it had good storytelling and there was a lot of adventure. And those were two aspects that I found be like, a strong positive. And also, I think for like stuff like reviews, I want to try to be objective, or at least somewhat unbiased and somewhat objective. It's hard to fully ever be as a human being, but I want to say something good about it and say something kind of in the middle and then something more negative. I mean, again, it could be something, on whatever product it is, right? So, again, like, it was very good at telling a story. And they did go out on a lot of adventures, and that much is true. I suppose probably something more of like a neutral disposition towards this. What note did I write down? I wrote down they had like solid chemistry between the characters. I guess I'm not sure if it's hard to really say what's neutral or not, but I feel like that's probably, to be honest, almost more of like a positive. But it did feel like the characters really did work well with each other, or either the actors or the actresses liked each other, or they enjoyed making the film together. Or there was something, because they felt like, at least most of the characters, it felt like they really just did work. They worked pretty well together, and they did like each other a lot. It felt like, and they did enjoy it or something, or there was just some kind of chemistry there, right? Like a strong sense of charisma. But again, that's, I don't know, that's more like a neutral thing. It's sometimes it's hard to find one for all of them. So I guess, okay, like a negative thing was this. So on my note I wrote, not enough focus on monster slaying or on witchers. So again, I think like one thing here in the series is that it's supposed to be called The Witcher. And now, I'm having a more of an attitude or perspective basically called rolling with it, right? I kind of just roll with it. It's just entertainment. I don't know. At the end of the day, it is what it is, right? But the TV show's called The Witcher. It's supposed to be based off of The Witcher, and I felt like there wasn't enough The Witcher in The Witcher. And they had they had Geralt as the main character, and they also brought in Yennefer, and they had Ciri. And they spent a lot of time on a lot of other characters in this show, other than Geralt. Now, I'm not necessarily, I know that's a lot of people. I've known a lot of people online. That's one of their biggest complaints, but it's just objectively true. It's like, you're watching, this is supposed to be about, The Witcher. And they did spend a lot of time with The Witcher, but they spent a lot of time in other stuff too. And they kind of split the focus, I think. And it's supposed to be about, I gotta roll with it, right? It is what it is. But, I guess before I go too far into this, I guess I should also, how long is this currently? Can't see my little button, about 10 minutes. I'm gonna try to keep the spoilers light, but at some point I probably am gonna go into spoilers. So I think, I mean, like, no, again, like, as long as the spoiler is not like super heavy or anything, it's like nothing like really that's gonna make or break it, right? But if I do go into like, you know, like plot line spoilers, I'm gonna probably tell you. I'm gonna try to tell people spoilers. So I'll try to put like specific major spoilers in its own little section if I can. But I guess I'll just also just say, in this video, there will be some mild spoilers. I'm trying not to make anything like you know, if you heard a small little spoiler of some minor thing, it's not gonna change your. You can still enjoy the show, right? But I'll put some personal examples of like more very specific things and more in detail depth. I'll try to give people like a big spoiler warning before I do that. It's kind of just the right thing to do, or at least I'll try to. I can't guarantee, you know, like, again, just you know, be warned a little bit, right? Okay. So I guess this is like kind of more of like a negative thing, but I do wish that they would have spent more time on the whole. I wish they would have put more monsters in the series, and they would have had more of this. They would have focused more on Geralt specifically, and him being a monster slayer, and or what do you call it, being like coming a Witcher. And I wish they would have shown more time building his specific character and his origin story and aspects about him. And I also kind of wish they would have went through, again, like maybe they could have gave him a little more of a backstory or a background for his character, or they could have explored some of these details. But they never really did that. I'm not saying, again, it's criticism. It doesn't make it right or wrong. But that's something I would have wished they did more of. Again, they could have brought more Witchers into the show, and they could have went and they had a bunch of like little side quests, right? They had these little side adventures. I kind of just wish they would have done more, you know, more slaying of, like, you know, or investigating or slaying these monsters. But they really just didn't do enough, in my opinion. But I also will say they did spend a lot of time also with the Witchers, and they did do some monster slaying. And again, like, it's like not a huge spoiler because it's just kind of part of the series if you know about it. They did go to the monster slaying base, we call it Kaer Morhen, and then again they kind of gave you a taste, like a little bit of like a taste tester to the series for monster slaying, but it wasn't like, I felt like it just wasn't enough, to be honest. Okay, so, oh yeah, and then also, and again, also I just want to say, like, I mean, I have nothing against Ciri as the character or Yennefer as a character. I honestly think that they're both highly interesting, and they're part of like the video games. I'm gonna be real with somebody, I've not read the books. I really could not tell you almost anything about the books, but other than what I've heard from other people. But it did resemble the video game a lot, and that's a good thing. I felt like, again, just like a small minor spoiler, it's just more like it's like a location setting. They did have they had like their, what do you call it, the mages. They had like basically called like a mages guild, or they called like the Brotherhood of Sorcerers or something. Or they had all these different magic users. And again, as a Christian, I guess this is like a little bit of like a Christian perspective, right? They did have a lot of sorcery in it. And again, I'm not personally, and it's like, I get that it's a fantasy world, and stuff like, you know, that stuff exists in fantasy, but I feel like it just overdid it. They put so much of it in it. And And again, they tried to put like, you know, Yennefer's story, she's all about magic or whatever. I felt like it was just way too overdone. And they wanted to keep introducing more and more sorcery in the story as much as they could. They started giving Ciri like sorcery powers. They had like again, they spent so much time with all of the sorcerers or the sorceresses. I felt like it was just way too much of stuff that had nothing to do, honestly, what I felt like The Witcher itself was supposed to be. And they spent so much time in like, I think like the last season of it, just consuming it with like magic. So that, again, like that was probably more like the negatives, right? And honestly, even the solid chemistry was probably more like a positive. Okay. Okay, so I wrote down 4 other things, and some of it is like a little bit of a wheel. Okay, so one aspect was called fate/destiny. Another thing was about choice. Then there was redemption, and then there was family. Okay, so I'll start with family, because I mean, again, some of these are going to have to be a little more on the spoiler side, but some of these are just like common. Some of these are just common, normal knowledge you get access to. So when it comes to the idea of family, again, they bring in the vast majority of the cast of the show, or from the characters that you would have known in the past by playing the video game or just having knowledge of, like, you know, story or whatever. They bring in Zoltan the dwarf. They also there's Dandelion, or I think you call him his name's called honestly I can't pronounce these names. I probably don't say them correctly. They call I think his name's they call him Jaskier, or he's also known as Dandelion. And they bring in and they have like, you know, they have like what's called again, I probably can't pronounce it correctly. They call it like Kaer Morhen, I think it's called. Again, they have like, you know, Vesemir, and they have a bunch of the other Witchers. They have again, like, you know, just some familiar faces that you probably would have known. And they are kind of like they aren't always like all the characters together. They basically are a family, and it's just kind of like it's a lovely thing in its own right. A very broken, screwed up, you know, sort of a family, but a family nonetheless. So family was one thing. So yeah, there's a lot of bonds, and they're willing to fight. They fight for each other, and they're willing to suffer and die for each other also. And in that right, it is honorable. Okay. So I feel like at this point, I really haven't gone too heavily in any kind of like real spoilers. Okay, so I'm gonna have to say this, right? Like, you know, maybe like a spoiler alert warning. Like, I mean, at this point, if you haven't watched the show and you still want to watch it, just turn away, right? Maybe towards the ending of the video or something, but honestly speaking, I'm probably just gonna go into there's gonna be a lot of different direct spoilers at this point. So turn away if you want, right? Okay. So the next one I probably would say is about redemption. So there is a lot of stories and aspects from The Witcher, even the Witcher 3, even in a lot of ways, but The Witcher TV show, about the idea of redemption. So like a lot of monsters and a lot of characters in this TV show, they and again. So again, okay. So let's try to explain this all one way or the other. So there's like the different races in the world. There's humans. Obviously we are humans, and there's like the fantasy aspect. They have elves. They have some dwarves. Basically, there's referred to as monsters, and different groups of people don't really like each other. There's a lot of conflict, and Geralt is basically regarded. It's like he's basically regarded as almost not even being human. Like he regards himself as a witcher, but again, he's kind of more of a partial human. He has some mutations and stuff. So Geralt, he ends up being pretty good friends with and supports a bunch of people who, in a lot of ways, you probably would view them as being like monsters. So I know that, I think in the very first episode, there's this lady, and then she's fighting this other guy, and then Geralt. Again, Geralt is he's usually depicted as interfering with other people's lives, even though he initially doesn't want to, for whatever the reasons may or may not be, or in holiness, perhaps even the right hand of God. He ends up being mixed into everyone else's problems, and he does try to save most of these, I guess you call them quote unquote monsters, but most of these monsters, he will spare their life, and he's like a friend to people who don't have a friend a lot of times. But when usually they will fight, he will fight the monsters, and he will spare their life at the very last second. But usually the monster will still try to attack him anyways, and he has to kill him. But he does go out of his way to offer mercy, more often than not. Especially if he views the monster as being an intelligent monster. He is known more often than not to being a friend of monsters, or people who aren't directly human, or just more intellectual creatures or beings. So there is this aspect of redemption. So, and again, and then there were a lot of characters who would be deemed as enemies or villains, who do slowly but steadily become more of anti-heroes, and they become more morally gray. They don't usually become full-scale heroes, but they do turn away from being villains at one point or another. So, there is that aspect. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of chances for redemption. But again, there's this guy who had this he basically was a dragon, and again, and pretty much every single story where there's a monster, they're not depicted as being directly evil, but they're also certainly not good either. But they just have a lot of broken lives. And I would even argue, I guess, even a Christian perspective, right? Is that most of these monsters in this world, it's basically they were a normal human at one point, and they committed some kind of an egregious action or a sin. And basically, God cursed them because of their sin. And there is even some biblical aspects. Obviously, the people who would do those things in holiness are not God. They're just usually there's some other being or person in this world who decided they were going to judge them for their actions. But because they committed some egregious action, they were cursed with some terrible infliction upon their lives. So, so yeah, again, so I guess even that aspect, right? They're, and again, the show did, for the most part, they have a lot of fan fiction are a lot of aspects that were taken from like the video games and stuff. But again, most of the characters were, again, it did show a lot of moral grayness, but yeah, it showed you that, you know, a person committed a sin, and they were being punished for their sin. But maybe they had a chance to find some kind of like redemption for their actions. And usually by meeting Geralt, the main character, they have a chance to find that like they're basically like their quote unquote like their salvation and their peace. Which in a lot of ways is it's like a very lovely thing. It's very loving. And they might not all find it, but and like Geralt does show a lot of respect, even though he does hunt monsters and try to destroy them. Especially if they're like if they're intelligent in some sense. He does offer a lot of mercy, or at least it seems like he tries to. And it's just like a lovely aspect. So I guess there's also the idea of choice. Okay, so for example, you have Yennefer, and you have Yennefer's story. She, in order to become, she basically is a sorceress. She's a witch. She uses spells. Obviously, as a Christian, we know that stuff is bad. But also, I can acknowledge that it's a fantasy world, and it's just entertainment, right? Or you can learn something from it. And you don't have to agree with everything. You can still find value from something, just even if it could be bad. But she at one point decides she's basically is a very disfigured hunchback, like a very ugly looking, outer appearance. But she has this ability to, I think like becoming like she can perform some kind of like an enchantment on her body. But the exchange is, in order to have this enchantment, where you can become basically like it sculpts your body to make yourself look like a perfect version of yourself. A very perverse abomination, though. But you can do that. But the exchange is this: is that you no longer can have children. And Yennefer does this. And okay, so she does this. She becomes like, this like gorgeous looking female, which really is what the actress looks like. I mean, she's just a very pretty looking female. It just is what it is. But basically, years and years later, or maybe they kind of try to depict it as like decades later, Yennefer kind of just grows up, and then she comes to the realization that she basically feels like she made a mistake. And she felt like she got robbed of this choice. Because she realized that, again, she was obsessed with money, power, very, very earthly, lustful, or even like intellectual things. Just like very potent, like drug-like aspects. Of like basically like the sins of the flesh. But she realized none of those things bring her even an ounce of satisfaction or happiness in life. And all the money, all the power, all the try to be like PG-13, but basically all the sex, all whatever you would want to do. Not one of those things ever brings you fulfillment or satisfaction of any real capacity. Okay, so this video is gonna end here. We'll see what other video I have. Okay, so this is my other MTG arena. I have a couple of 1 hour videos I can use too. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but it'll be what it'll be, right? Okay, so yeah, Yennefer, she ends up, she basically, like, in a sense, sells away her ability for, to have children for all the earthly desires that you could want. And she realizes when she's older, like 20, 30, I mean, it's really, it's kind of vague just how old she supposedly is. Like, you have like an eternal, like, you look like this perfect version of yourself forever. You don't look like you age. You don't really, it's a very unnatural. But she realizes, like, I don't know, like 30 years after she does this, that she felt robbed of her ability to make that choice. Because she couldn't have children. She realized that this idea of having a legacy to leave behind, of having a child, was so valuable. But she pursued basically just nothing for her whole life. You know, she had all that power, right? All her sorcery allows her to cast spells. You know, all this stuff, right? But it never brought her never brought her anything good in her life. Anything she actually cared about. So this is it's like the idea of choice. And also the consequences of your actions. And honestly, a lot of this was very biblical in its own sense. It's like, you know, you read like in the Bible, I think like you got like Abraham, right? Like Abraham had his legacy, he needed a child to leave behind. And there's a lot of stories in scripture that represent these things. And it just kind of reminded me a little bit. And then again, like, so, and then even going back to the idea of family, and then Yennefer wanted a child. So she went on this desperate quest to try to find a way to regain her ability to have a child, because she wants to leave something behind that actually matters when she dies. So there's that quest with the dragon, and she wants to go there and she wants to slay the dragon because she believes that a dragon's like heart or something will give her the ability to heal this infertility that she basically did to herself. And she wants to become a mother or something. She believes being a mother is like her life fulfillment. And to be honest, it is very biblical, but I think that actually is correct. And it was something I thought was very interesting and it was very honorable. You know, despite the series having a lot of flaws and faults, that was very honorable. And then eventually she comes to realization. She comes to the very end where there's the dragon, and the dragon is trying to protect this family. And she realizes that the dragon has like a daughter, and that he has a dragon egg that was gonna hatch, and then it had a child in that egg. And she realizes that, you know, she decides she's gonna abandon her idea of trying to take this, like, I don't know, some kind of or I think, okay, I guess like it was basically like a side quest, but I think it was like the dragon's stone or like the dragon's egg. You could consume its power or something, and it would heal you up. Okay, whatever the reason, whatever the technicalities are. She realizes that she becomes basically like a mother by protecting this dragon's egg from these thieves who want to come in. And they just want to take that dragon's egg so they can sell it for a bunch of money, or they want all these like lustful things of the earth. And she defends this egg because she becomes like, you know, she starts becoming a mother, not because she actually has a child, but because she starts learning how to the idea of like maternity. Like she protects and nurtures and takes care of a child, and in that sense she becomes a mother. Because she starts behaving like a mother instead of just, there's like the outer sense and the inner sense. Like you have the true value, and you have like the kind of the worthless outer value. I mean, I don't know if I want to say there's anything wrong with like the outer value, but it's just, it doesn't have that deep, like indefinite value. From like a woman, a woman has her looks, but her looks will only go so far. But a woman having a child and raising and taking care of her children, that's a tremendous long-term investment that has very deep value. It's very noble. So, and then she abandons, her pursuit of power in this specific instance, and she protects this baby, or she protects this little child. It was very noble. It's something I remember about the series. Okay, so then I guess the idea of fate and destiny. So since I'm already talking about this issue, I might as well just talk about the next point. Yennefer. So again, like the story is kind of split between both. It's split between three characters. There's Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri. And they're all three as destiny kind of interwoven together. Also, Dandelion's kind of somewhat interwoven into this story mess one way or the other too. Now I think he's also kind of like the narrator or the author. But Yennefer, basically the three of those people, honestly the three, I could even say the four of them, to be honest, they become like a family. Like there's Geralt, there's Yennefer, they basically become, in a sense, married. And look at the Witcher 3, for example, too. Yeah, like Geralt and Yennefer basically become husband and wife, and they have a child, Ciri, and Ciri's basically their child. So Yennefer basically becomes Ciri's mother, and Geralt becomes Ciri's father, and they kind of have this like strong. I'm not sure if you can say like a nuclear family, but they have a strong family. It's a highly tightly woven together and knitted family. It might be a broken family. They might not technically none of them, as far as I'm concerned, are related by blood, but they're bound by something like something righteous, and then that's noble, right? So I guess even the pursuit for Yennefer. Yennefer at one point, again, they all have their own little story of how they all kind of came together, but Yennefer at one point loses her sorcery powers, so she finds Ciri and she learns that like some demon mistress was gonna try to entice her, and she learns that she could basically take Ciri and basically like damn her into hell or something, and then she could take all of her powers, so she can regain her sorcery again, because she's obsessed with the flesh, the lust of the flesh. And Geralt ends up being kind of interwoven into this destiny with Ciri, and Yennefer basically tries to betray their family. They're kind of like a three-person family, a little bit with Jaskier too, but how long is this currently? 37 minutes, I think. And then she tries to betray them. She ends up failing at the end. Geralt gets really mad at her and just basically just despises her for it. But then over more time, Yennefer spends all this time trying to get back into good graces with Geralt and with Ciri. And Yennefer basically spends long periods of her life protecting Ciri and loving Ciri and honoring her and nurturing her, and she ends up becoming like her magic teacher or something again. And some of the stuff is very great. As a Christian, obviously sorcery is a bad thing, but it's just gonna be what's gonna be, right? You can't change it. But Yennefer basically becomes Ciri's mother, and she learns to set aside her earthly desires to become a mother-like figure for Ciri. And also Yennefer learns to become a teacher and the head mistress over the I don't know what you call it, the Brotherhood something college they have. So Yennefer slowly, over the course of years, having Ciri come into her life, she becomes a true mother in her own sense, not because she gave birth to a child, but because she loves and honors and nurtures Ciri. And Ciri basically becomes her child. And she's willing to Yennefer is even willing to give up her own life, or to trade, tremendous amounts of things, or to do a whole bunch of things to protect Ciri through love. And it is a very it's a very loving thing to do, right? It's she learns to become a true mother. So that was one aspect of fate and destiny. And then like the other aspect of fate and destiny. Okay, so let's move away from Yennefer, I guess, a little bit. But so Geralt ends up interacting and learning to meet Ciri when her grandmother was at some kind of like a ball or something, or they were trying to find a suitor for her child. Her child had something called, I think it was called like the Elder Blood. Eventually, that got passed on or inherited back to Ciri, and Geralt basically takes some kind of a vow or something, and ends up becoming like his destiny becomes bound to Ciri. Also, Ciri is supposed to be, I think, Emerus. There's like a major political faction, basically known as, I think, called the Nilfgaardians, and there's Emperor. It's called Emerus, or it's called basically the leader of the Nilfgaardian, the Emperor. He supposedly he hooked up with this other girl, and I think like basically she was like a bastard child of this emperor. So technically it's very complex, right? But and Geralt took some kind of a vow. So he gained the destiny of this. Ciri became Geralt's destiny from that moment forward. I think Ciri was like a little child at that point. She's kind of young throughout the whole series, but so his destiny becomes interwoven with Ciri's. Then, at some point throughout the series, there is Geralt is and some of this is kind of humor based too, right? But Geralt is like apparently like having trouble sleeping, and he's like trying to get a wishes from a genie or something. Not a genie. It's called a djinn, and he's trying to get some wishes so he can sleep. And there is, okay, by the way, there is some humor, and that was actually a very funny episode, to be honest. But and his friend Jaskier, I think it's supposed to be called Dandelion, but ends up getting his throat slashed or something, or hurt, and he ends up having to go through this big. Again, this is like a giant, the story had a lot of side quests, so that resembles The Witcher 3 a lot, the third Witcher game, which was cool in a lot of ways. But and they had a lot of they took a lot of moments from the Witcher video game, and they put it in the TV show, which I appreciated, because they showed that they did honor the lore a lot. I mean, maybe they had their own problems, but they did at least have a lot of references to stuff. If you played The Witcher 3, you knew that like Yennefer and Geralt had some kind of a genie, or I call it like a djinn, bind them by some wishes or something. And they want to know if they truly were in love or not. Yeah, so Geralt ends up meeting Yennefer, and he uses his third wish. So Yennefer tries to manipulate Geralt because she wants the djinn's power or something for herself. Geralt uses his third wish to bind his fate and destiny to Yennefer, so they become like basically lovers forever. I don't know how that makes any sense to me. To be honest, I don't know. Again, I know it's in the video game. I don't know if it might be in the books. I've never read the books, but that doesn't really make any sense. I don't know why they did that, or why Geralt would want to be bound to Yennefer. Maybe he thought she was like super hot or something. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was just lonely or something. But and his fate and his destiny became interwoven to Yennefer. So now Geralt is like this, some kind of like supernatural mystical power of the universe, like some destiny and fate, or like in holiness, maybe the literal right hand of God dictates. Now he bound those people's lives and their souls together for some major story. I mean, I'm not trying to blast me. Who's this say? I mean, I literally don't know. But so yeah, Geralt becomes bound to Yennefer, and then Geralt also is bound to Ciri, and his fate and his destiny becomes linked to both of them. And at one point or another, Geralt's like destiny becomes linked to this villain in like the third season. I just watched the episode today. I can't remember exactly what his name is, but basically the rogue mage in uh the end of the season 3. And he talks about how his destiny or something is like the villain's destiny. The villain's trying to get Geralt to work with him, and Geralt just refuses. So again, there's a lot of destiny and a lot of fate, and yeah, oh, yeah. Then I guess at one point I think like Yennefer and Ciri, they had like their destiny and fate gets bound. Yeah, and then like Dandelion works with Yennefer, Dandelion works with Ciri, and then Dandelion works with Geralt, and they're kind of all bound together in some fate with the whole series. It's kind of crazy, but it's also super interesting at the same time. Like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just kind of made this all up as they were going, but it was definitely interesting to unravel it all. And I don't know, because like it is kind of biblical. Like, there are examples in scripture where people become bound to to vows or to certain their words, or sometimes like your words or like your life can be bound to someone else's their fate. Like you have like Jonathan and King David were basically were bound by their own like fate or something. Or like you even had King Saul and David. You had like both you had Jonathan and David, Jonathan and Saul kind of like linked back to David. And again, you had all these different characters interwoven all together in one big story. And like The Witcher does resemble, I feel like maybe this is just my own. Maybe I'm smoking whatever I do too, but I do resemble like the story of David. I feel like does in some percentage kind of reflects like The Witcher a little bit. You just honestly, The Witcher is so not The Witcher, like the story of David is so there's so many different parts and puzzle pieces and stuff that move from character to character. It's such a highly intricate story. And there are examples, like even watching the TV show Merlin resembles like David. The story of David is such an incredible story. Even if you didn't look at it from a Christian point of view, you just looked at it from like a human point of view, like you couldn't make that kind of stuff up. It's so intense. And it's just like all these different characters and like The Witcher back and forth here and there. But it was cool at the same time. But now the show's ended. It probably was a bad idea for them to try to make their own little origin stories for why the world was the way that it was. But I can't do anything about it either. So really, stuff like the origin stories for a fantasy story, since it's not actually like quote unquote real. Like, in Holiness, God is real. Like the Bible is real. Like Genesis is real. We know the actual creation of human beings and life. But if you have a fantasy story, it's not real. You should try to like not talk about those stuff, because there isn't an answer to it to begin with. Unless the original author tries to write something for it, you should just not talk about it, since it's not real. Like that's just a bad idea. So also going into season 4, I feel like if you're not going to have Henry Cavill be the Witcher, I just don't see the show going anywhere. Now, I mean, I'm nothing against this guy, like called Liam Helsing, I think, or Hemsing. It was like the Thor's younger brother or something. I have nothing against him. I think he was like in the Hunger Games. I mean, he could do a cool job. He's just not going to be Geralt. Now, I think what they could do with the TV show is they could kind of just let the original story die and just do some spin-offs of it or something. I think they could do that. I think that you can't replace the character. You have 3 full seasons. Like, they could bring Henry back, sure. I think that'd be fine. But they're gonna have to do something different. There's just no way he can become Geralt. He can be a different character. Liam could be a different character. They could just make a brand new Witcher, and they could have Geralt die or something, or they could go on a different road, and then they could do a whole bunch of other stuff. But you can't keep the story going if you're not gonna have the main character who's been part of the story the whole time. Like, I just don't see that. I don't see it working. But yeah, like season 4, I don't know if it's ever gonna come out, but honestly speaking, it's pretty wrapped up, to be honest. There are some plot lines for a season 4, but it's really not necessary that they have to make another one. I feel like they're at the point in the story and the TV show where if they just kind of stopped it where it is, it would probably be fine. It has like some of the video game aspects, and it kind of got everyone and everything to a point where people could just be kind of content with it. I mean, there's really nothing more they have to do. At this point, they're just kind of making up brand new stories. If The Witcher 4 were to come out, then they could start working more on new stuff. Honestly, I have no idea when that's ever going to come out, but it could come out within the next like 10 years or something. But yeah. How long is this currently? 50 plus minutes. Okay, so yeah, I guess that's some of my reasons. That's some of my reasons why I feel like it's a mixed review, or not. That's why I would say yes, like a check mark. Yes, I would recommend it, but it's also kind of a mixed disposition because it's like, because again, like I feel like they just didn't. Again, like, I did like it. I did like the characters a lot. There was a lot of synergy. A lot of it felt like the actors, like especially Yennefer and like Geralt, they really had a lot of chemistry. They really worked well together, and a lot of the characters were very believable, and they looked like they looked and they talked and they acted like the way they were supposed to, at least most of the time, for the most part. And they had a lot of tie-ins to the video game, and I felt like the Witcher TV show was very deeply based off of The Witcher 3. And they had a lot of like references, even if they weren't like perfect references. If you played the game, you were like immediately could tell. Like there was they did kind of like play some like what do you call some what's it called? Not bait and switch, but they kind of switched around some of the characters, the choices they would have made in the game, in the TV show. But they did resemble the characters that you would think they were supposed to represent. And they behaved, talked, looked, and acted, for the most part, like you would think they were supposed to look like. And they did have a lot of references to the video game. There was a lot. So, yeah, like the one I was talking about before, like Yennefer helps a bunch of these like elves escape the city. You go in like a boat. I think that's supposed to be Triss's story. They kind of switched it around a little bit, but they were honoring the lore. And again, the people who made it, they're kind of hateful, but it did put a lot of like fan love, or showing respect to the fans for a lot of it. But it had its problems, but there was a lot of references. So yeah, like I felt like the best way to watch this show, to be able to enjoy it, is you have to set aside your personal sense of expectations, that it's not going to be about Geralt becoming a monster slayer and focusing on being a monster slayer. It's going to be a lot of like politics within the world, and all the different, like you have like a trio of a Destiny. You have 3 main characters rather than 1, and Geralt is interwoven into these stories. And Yennefer feels like a strong main character most of the time. It's kind of like you have Yennefer and you have Geralt as 2 main characters interwoven together. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm not sure if it's a bad thing necessarily either. It's just not. It's just it. It's just your expectations for the show aren't going to be what you necessarily would think it would. It diverted your expectations. So, but if you come in with the mindset that it's not going to be the most traditional, normal sense, instead you come in with a mindset that's going to be a little bit different than you think, and you just kind of roll with it a little bit. It does make sense as if you watch all three of the seasons. It does explain itself. It does make sense, and it will work itself out eventually. It just takes some time. It's a little bit of a slow burn. So, yeah, and then everything kind of all comes together eventually. And they use the characters from the Mages College, and you have Ciri's kind of background, and you have Geralt's background, and all three of the groups eventually kind of all the conflict between all the world. It all kind of comes crashing together, and all the trials and the tests, they come through to the very end. And it is very satisfying, it's very good. But it just takes some time. And you got to change your mindset looking at the series. And that's not an easy thing to do. Or even Fallout 76. A game that a lot of people, because when it came out, it was just a giant dumpster fire. But they worked on it, and they got through it, and they built something great. I think Fallout 76, in my opinion, is a pretty good game. But it had a lot of issues wrong with it. But they worked on it, and they pushed through. And I think that if The Witcher, the TV show, and I think if they make a season 4, and they release it, and they do a really good job, and they try to honor the series, and they honor the lore, they show respect for the characters and the audiences, and maybe if they at least, at minimum, right? I think at minimum, they bring Geralt back for at least like a cameo, or like a one visit to the new TV show, or like one episode. At least he's partially in the series. I think that could be a net good. Their relationship's probably done. But if they show respect to the fans and the audience and the source material, or they at least can try to keep their mouths shut and not get into big trouble, I think they could. I think the Witcher TV show has a future, but they're gonna have to work at it, and it could succeed. And again, The Witcher 4 eventually is gonna come out. I feel like it could be a great video game. I think the franchise, it has a future and it has a hope, but they're gonna have to work on it. And also from a Christian point of view, I feel like there's a lot of value you could learn from it. It's the same thing you got the Lord of the Rings, for example. That's a fantasy series, and sure, they have some sorcery, or they have some bad crap in it. But if you look at it from an adventure and from a storytelling point of view, just neutral characters who go through trials and tests, I think that you could learn and you could gain a lot of value from it if you're willing to be slightly open-minded, or in holiness if it's within God's will. And I personally, I have more of a neutral, open-minded towards fantasy. I love fantasy most of my life. I'm not going to deny there's some sketchy stuff in it. There's also a lot of good things in it too. So I do feel like the franchise, again, I feel like I would give it my, I would say it has hope and it has a future, presuming they don't screw it up. Or maybe they hand the project to somebody else, or what they could do is they could pivot from their current pathway and try something different. Hand the project to somebody else's reins. Again, they could go through an origin story for Geralt. They probably are going to screw that up. They could go through the books, and they could make a one-for-one for the books, and people probably would love that. And again, just try to be respectful to the lore. And I think your fans and your critics will like it. Now, obviously, there'll always be people who will be critical. Yeah, the fourth game's coming out. They have some spin-off games. They're remaking the first game. I think they made a couple board games. They have a couple like movies or something. I never watched them. I should consider it, but they're kind of like, I think they're like animated movies, and I think there's at least 2 of them, like an hour plus long. They could be interesting. I mean, I don't know much about them. I've heard of them. Yeah. Also, what they could do with the TV show is they could just wait for like, I don't know, like 5 years. Let the series. It's like it was an upside down burning dumpster fire, and they pissed off a lot of fans. Which, I mean, your show could be good or bad, but you piss off your fans, it's just everybody's gonna be mad. They gave it like 5 years, let it calm down, let it cool off, let the fire die out. They could start a brand new, and like they could have Liam Helsum. I can't pronounce his name, but yeah, they could just make a brand new Witcher. He doesn't have to take Geralt's role. He could just be a new character, and they could go through a new story with a new character. I think it could work. And then they wouldn't have to fully use the source material that already exists because they're just kind of making a brand new story. Or they could take inspiration from the books. Okay, so yeah. I guess like some of the, again, like a good storytelling adventure. There was a solid chemistry between the characters, but they didn't focus enough on the Witchers and monster slaying. So yeah, I guess like again, overall, I had a good time and I enjoyed it, and I probably would recommend it. That you should consider watching it. And there are some Christian themes in it, and there also is a lot of things that are highly shady. But yeah, I appreciate it. So, as I've been trying to say more, feel free to write something in the comments about what you think or feel, or maybe you disagree or you agree with what I have to say. Try to be neutral. I try not to be too crass, but like try not to be a dick. And try to be like a decent, like a neutral. Try to be more neutral in the comments, right? Or try to be like uplifting. But yeah, tell me what you think about the TV show, or if you're willing to give it a second chance and try looking at it from a new perspective. And what did you find any Christian themes in it, or do you think is there more in depth of Christian themes in it? And like whatever you want to say. Yeah. But thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for watching. God is good.